Shalom and welcome to Challenging Torah. We've discussed sacred time. The Exodus brought us to the place where we create the holiday of Passover. Before we even leave, God says, this is your calendar. We're commanded to keep the Shabbat. We create cathedrals in time. And those cathedrals in time guide us throughout our Jewish lives. Sacred time is what makes us a Jew. And what we do is what makes us Jewish. Sacred deeds. Immediately after the grand event at Sinai, we come down to the nitty-gritty. How do we treat our neighbor? How do we treat someone who's lost his ox? How do we treat all of our fellow human beings, whether the widow, the orphan, the stranger? This is sacred deed, God within the sacred deed. And now we come to the time that completes this triangle. Sacred deeds, sacred time, and now sacred space. And where do we find sacred space as we begin this story of the Mishkan for the next 4 portions? As Aviva Zornberg says, sacred space is really the sacred space within the human heart. And how do we find a place for that human heart to communicate with all that is holy? We begin from the place of generosity. Open your heart, God says. Before he even explains, what are we building, what are we doing, what do I need all this stuff for? God is interior designer. I often think this is the inner Martha Stewart of God, bored after creation. Bring me this stuff. And God says, bring me an offering from every person that gives it willingly with his heart. Yidabeno libo, you shall take an offering. And I'm pretty specific. This is the offering that you shall take. Gold, silver, copper, blue, purple, scarlet, fine linen, goat's hair, the list goes on. But the most important thing is that this is an elevation, Teruma, of your heart. It literally means to lift up. We can only begin to enter sacred space when we open our heart in generosity. And then God says, after the list, the most important words in the next 4 portions. Asuli mikdash, make me a holy space, vashachanti betocham, and I will dwell with you, or within you. Well, how do we build this sacred space? We build it, we know, with offerings of the heart. And our first question is, why do we need this at all? If it's the offerings of my heart, and God is everywhere, why do we need a physical space at all? Why build this tabernacle with all of its instructions and all of its difficulties and all of its gold and silver and copper and beauty? Why? The sages are divided on this. On one hand, it appears, as Maimonides says, we're still limited beings. We don't really understand the abstract. And so, even though it would have been perfectly fine if we were capable of it, to live without a Mishkan, without a divine space that's been created and enclosed, we can't keep attention long enough. We can't remember. We need a portable Sinai so that we can remember that we stood at Sinai, in that place where without any Mishkan, we stood there face to face, down to the lowest water carrier. But what makes it more complicated is that maybe this is just one giant building project, because we have such a small amount of attention that no sooner does that man Moses disappear for 41 instead of 40 days, and all of these goods are taken to build a golden calf. And it appears that this sanctuary building comes from the place that says, well, rather than have them build a calf, let's all be involved in a positive project that is a space for God. Fairly pshat, fairly simple, but still part of the equation. And yet we ask the question, if we have a portable Sinai, why does God say, Asuli mikdash, make me a mikdash? make me a Mishkan, with a capital M, V'shachanti, and I will dwell, b'tocham. We start in the singular, we end in the plural. I will dwell within you, within them, us, human beings, created places. And so while on one hand, as Rashi says, God is saying, let them make me a house for holiness, this is just not an object, but an enclosed space for the holy. But the real holy space, again, is in the human heart. And so God says in a midrash, I have created my only daughter, that being us in Kabbalistic terms, and I must let her go and live a life and let her get married. But I'm asking her, Asuli dira, make me a little granny apartment. Make me an apartment, a space. Literally the midrash uses the word dira. And I will come to visit. Well, if God is coming to visit, I think we should clean up. How is this world looking right now? It's kind of a mess. I don't know that I would want God to come and visit, and certainly not turn on the news in this last week. No, too many beheadings, too much barbarity. We need to do a cleanup. And this is the year of our Musar training. And as we use Musar, the Hasidim take this place of building the inner Mishkan to the place that says, look at your own inner qualities. What kind of clean up do you have to do of your inner apartment before God can come to visit? And one of the commentators, Or HaMa'ir, says we need to take out, bafa, shine the gifts of our internal qualities. And he lists those as attributes of generosity, love, fear, beauty, gratitude, righteousness, love, again, of the awe of the Holy One. We can use this time to clean up the apartment. And so we end what is going to be 4 more portions. This is only the first, and we'll discuss all the furnishings later on. And each one is important. But Asuli Mishkan, make me a space, God says. V'shachanti b'tocham, and I will dwell within you. It's time for us to clean up the space. Shabbat Shalom. See you on Saturday morning.